if somebody's going to be scrolling on Facebook and Instagram, for example, what image, what video, what copy am I going to use that's going to attract that person's attention enough to stop what they're doing, look at my ad and click on it and take an action? Because you're really stopping somebody in their tracks on social media, where if you're running a Google search ad, for example, they already have intent for what you want. You just need to prove that you're the best option for what they're looking for. Welcome back to the S Factor. I'm Drew Blumenthal, and I own a digital marketing and advertising agency, and my success factor is problem solving.
Hello, Drew. Good morning, and welcome to the S Factor. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Today's episode is all surrounding paid advertisements and how business owners can leverage paid advertisements to get their word out, and especially for digital marketing purposes. So let's get a bit of background about yourself. You started your own agency in 2017, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, perfect. So tell us about that journey.
Absolutely. So I was working for large ad agencies. What ended up happening, it was a local bar was my first client that I started doing on my own. And basically, like, they asked me to do it. It was very little money, but I was still working for a large ad agency. And I'm like, man, I like this so much better being my own boss. And then it became a natural progression because I'm like really got focused on that. And then in October of 2017, then I went off on my own and started doing this full time on my own. And it was a slow start, but it was at least it was my own. I don't regret going into the agency world to start out at all. It's very, very long hours. It's a lot of work for very little pay, but you get very, very good experience. And it's pretty much like getting thrown right in the deep end when you work for a large ad agency. So it's that's what I did right out of college. So I learned just so much very quickly. But then I started really building my own agency, and really first I started with Google and Facebook ads, which was what I had the most experience in. And then over time, just really started to expand in other complementary services, because what I got to see is that ads on their own don't always work or don't always produce the best results. And it's just having synergistic services like web development and graphic design and SEO and other things with it can really complement each other if they're all executed synergistically together.
Okay, excellent. And in terms of revenue and how well your agency has done, if you're comfortable, would you mind sharing some numbers with us?
Yeah. So the first year, I would say it was around, I think 65,000 is what I made. So not a ton of revenue. Then the year after, it was 150, and then it got to 250, and then it was last year it was 950,000, I think, or 970. And it's what I've definitely seen has worked really well is, one, there are no shortcuts. If you really want to do it honestly, you're going to have to put in a lot of hours and a lot of work. But then focusing on both areas of, one is client retention. So it's how can I keep my current clients happy? How can I focus on getting them the best results that they can? Because one is, if you can do it, you get a lot of reoccurring revenue. And then number two is they'll refer and they'll use other services from you. So making sure that you could do what you can to pay attention to your current clients and make yourself available, be able to actually solve the problems and make sure that they're earning an ROI. So that's definitely one area. And then number two is, how am I going to get new clients? So understanding what are the traffic sources? Where are people deciding to make a decision to hire someone in the space? So that's where I really got into Upwork. I really got into a platform called Marketer Hire. I started doing some of my own SEO. I started running some of my own paid ads. So I like started to get into different platforms and really also studying the agencies that I really like and also seeing what are they doing. So being able to do a really strong, and I still do this to date when, especially when I have downtime, is trying to study what my competitor agencies are doing and not just like what keywords are they ranking for and what are they bidding on, but what platforms are they on? What do they emphasize? Like what really matters to them. And I'm not trying to be a direct copy, but I'm also knowing that, for example, one platform that I use a lot now is Clutch. And what I've noticed is all the big agencies are on it and focus on ranking on it. So I'm like, well, if they're all doing it, then I need to do it too.
Excellent. One of the great things you've said, besides how the company has progressed, which is remarkable in itself, but is there are no shortcuts. And just to piggyback on that, there are no shortcuts to creating a digital strategy either. So majority of our listeners or viewers are small business owners, self-employed individuals. So the thing is that we want to give them some value in terms of how to go about creating that digital strategy. So again, I want to sort of go into this and, you can think of this in very general terms, but what are some of the first things a company or an individual needs to do when they're going about creating that digital strategy?
Well, number one is, what is the website, what is the landing page experience going to look like? Because if you're going to run paid ads, that's really where everybody's going to go, or organic, the same thing. So you need to make sure if people are going to the website that it's mobile responsive, that you have forms that people are going to fill out. Are you going to try and get them to book on a calendar? Like all of those kinds of things. Am I going to have reviews on there so people could trust my business? How am I going to explain what I do to somebody who doesn't know what I do, and explain it on a website or a landing page that somebody's going to be like, oh, this is what they offer. I understand the value here. I want this. So being able to do that first and then going into the strategy of how am I going to market this is the way to really go about it. Then number two is really, how am I going to quantify it? Meaning, am I making sure that you have Google Analytics set up, making sure that you're tracking the conversions that you want to track, and really being able to study that data so that way you know what's working and what's not. So when you start running all of these different channels, or you start doing different marketing and advertising activities, it's important to really understand from an analytics perspective which ones are getting me form fills or purchases, which ones are getting people to spend the most time on the website and engaging with it. So it's like being able to, after you set up your website and landing page that's good, you want to make sure that you're really spending the time to studying it, because then you can end up spending a lot of money and wasting it if you're not really knowing what's working and what's not.
Okay, perfect. So getting a little more into the weeds, if we are, in terms of Google, Facebook, Instagram, there's so many different platforms where we can actually invest in. So how does a business understand where their audience is if it is a very new business?
Right. So with Google, I mean, yes, they offer other services, but like search is the main thing that Google offers. So trying to understand what keywords somebody would be searching for, and then trying to figure out, can I bid on those keywords or not? Because sometimes you offer something that's very, very unique, and then it's hard to run Google search ads on that if nobody's searching directly what you want. Like sometimes I think of Google as like a modern day Yellow Pages, just because somebody goes to Google with intent, they know exactly what they want, and then they want something that already matches it. So you're trying to capture or foster the demand that already exists, versus social media, for example, where you're targeting based on behaviors and interests. So if you have something that's brand new or something that people have not really heard of, that's where doing a social media strategy can work really well, because you're creating demand for something that doesn't already exist. But then you also have to think of it from a creative perspective of, if somebody's going to be scrolling on Facebook and Instagram, for example, what image, what video, what copy am I going to use that's going to attract that person's attention enough to stop what they're doing, look at my ad and click on it and take an action? Because you're really stopping somebody in their tracks on social media, where if you're running a Google search ad, for example, they already have intent for what you want. You just need to prove that you're the best option for what they're looking for.
Right. So let's say I've invested a little bit of money, trial and error. Let's say I'm getting good results from Google. From there, how do I scale up my advertising strategy?
So I try and do it slow and steady. So what I usually do is I look at the budget that somebody's spending and usually try and increase it like 20 to like 30% maximum at a time. And it's very easy to want to double your budget, but you're dealing with a machine-based AI algorithm where if you spend too much too quickly, the algorithm can't catch up with the amount of conversions and your cost per conversion goes up. So it's better to increase your budget, say 20%, give it a week or two, see if the conversion rate holds and your cost per conversion holds up, and then you could spend and scale up again. Like, if you try and do it too quickly and too eagerly, then you could end up wasting a lot of money. You also need to make sure that when you're bringing more traffic to your website, that the conversion rate remains the same. Because if you're spending more, that means you're bringing more traffic, and then the algorithm has to work then harder to find more people to convert because you're expanding your pool. So sometimes you might try and spend more money and then you don't see the same return that you were. And that means that you need to look at the website and say, okay, my conversion rate is not going up. I'm spending more per conversion and I'm not getting more conversions for my higher budget. So how do I improve my website? How do I improve the user experience to be able to convert more people? So maybe, for example, if you're an e-commerce store, maybe you need to add more product reviews or product photos. Maybe if you're a service-based business, you need to add, say, more description about the services that you're offering, like trying to figure out what can help me to get to the next level. And I know I talked about earlier about competition. What you could always study your competition and see, what does my competition have on their website? What does my competition have on their landing page that maybe I'm missing that will help me get my conversion rate up so I can continue to scale my budget higher?
Perfect. So one of the things you mentioned was about conversion. So in terms of setting up a website, what are some of the must-haves that you should have on your website in order to get those conversions?
Right. So number one is, what am I defining as a conversion? So if somebody says, all right, a conversion is a form fill out or a click to call, like just trying to figure out what am I going to count as a conversion to make sure that that's there. That's number one. Number two is understanding what is going to convince that person to then take that action. So like I said, is it product photos? Is it videos? Is it a strong product description? Is it reviews? Like, those are all things that people are looking for when they're making a decision. So it's like every industry can be a little bit different, but understanding, like, take a step back, know that the people that you're trying to bring in are not referrals or people that have heard of you. So if you were a cold person in the street that has never heard of the business, what would you really be looking for in order to make that conversion? Like, what would convince you enough to really make that decision? So like, for example, on my landing page, I do have the form at the top and the bottom. I do have like the steps of the process. So for each service, like, what are the steps that I take? I have case studies on there. I have reviews. So it's like all the things that I've seen my competitors have, I have on my landing pages. And again, they do help, and it is trial and error at the same time too. But those are really elements that every website should have in order to get the conversion rate up.
Okay, perfect. You have added a lot of value to the audience. One of the final things I want to know is about latest trends. What are some of the latest trends that you're seeing right now in the world of digital marketing?
I mean, number one is AI. I'm sure you hear it all day long. And it's like, it is a very powerful tool. Like, I actually started using ChatGPT, I would say now like a year, maybe 2 years ago. And it is very powerful. The reality, though, is it depends on who's using it, because like you're setting commands for these things. So you have to give it the right commands in order for it to produce the results that you want it to do. So maybe you say, find me this or give me this. Like, it's kind of like talking into Siri a little bit, where if you talk to Siri and you don't get what you want out of it, sometimes you need to say the voice command a little bit differently. AI is the same idea, where it can do very, very powerful things, but you also need to know what you're asking for. So it's not going to replace a human necessarily. It's just humans need to know how to use it as a tool in their toolbox to be able to leverage it the right way.
Okay, perfect. Drew, thank you so much for all the value you've added. If people wanted to find you, where would they look?
Sure. You can find me on my website at 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗪sem.com and on Instagram at 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗪sem.
Okay, perfect. And those will be linked in the description below. Drew, thank you so much again for your time, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Tariq. It was great being on.